Welcome to the Purpose of this book. And we are picking up on page 114. I think on some of our pre-gaming we were doing, David. No recap. We're just going to jump right in and
Yes, sir.
keep on powering into chapter two wives here. And I think it's probably fair to say, um, is David and I were talking, some of this content is pretty just sort of it's on the surface and it doesn't necessarily, there's not a lot of stuff behind it like other parts of the book as we look at some of these paragraphs. So there might be some where we're going to say kind of just a little bit and we're not going to have any great nuggets or callbacks because some of this is just sort of this is what it is in this chapter and a couple of the chapters to follow as well. So we'll let you know. Okay. So bottom of 114, second last paragraph. But sometimes oh, hold on. So many notes here. But sometimes you must start life anew. We know women who have done it. If such women adopt a spiritual way of life, their road will be smoother.
Yeah, so that actually just referring back to the last paragraph. This paragraph is set up by the prior paragraph. Halfway through the paragraph, it says some men cannot or will not get over alcoholism. When they become too dangerous, we think the kind thing is to lock them up. But of course, a good doctor should always be consulted. The wives and children of such men suffer horribly, but not more than the men themselves. You know what I have found out through a few 24 hours of working with others today that I can get free whether I stay or I go.
Mm.
And I think he's actually relating this to guess what? There's Al-Anon. You can go to Al-Anon, you can get yourself a sponsor and you do this work here and you get free too, whether you're alcoholic is sober or not. Because remember, their drug of no choice is the alcoholic.
Yeah.
And if the alcoholic is of harm to the kids and the wife, they have to make a choice, or maybe they're not making a choice. But not to take this down a rocky road. The bottom line is for me, anyways, Al-Anon is a 12-step program that works also, and is spiritually divine, just like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are, because that's where they come from. So yeah, they can get well whether they stay or they go.
Hmm. I don't think I have anything to add to that. Continuing the bottom of 114. If your husband is a drinker, you probably worry over what other people are thinking and you hate to meet your friends. You draw more and more into yourself and you think everyone is talking about conditions at your home. You avoid the subject of drinking, even with your own parents. You do not know what to tell the children. When your husband is bad, you become a trembling recluse, wishing the telephone had never been invented.
And to think that I thought I wasn't harming anyone else but myself. Are you kidding me? That paragraph screams at me harms that I was causing my family. Screams at me. And you know what? Not that my wife and I ever reminisce about the past, because we do not. But after 25 years of sobriety and being a recovered alcoholic and a drug addict, we have got a healthy relationship today. But we have had discussions about this. And I do know how my wife, this paragraph and the next paragraph is exactly what my wife was experiencing every single moment of every single day. So a lot of times I'll sponsor people and they'll say, well, I really didn't harm anyone but myself. Please, let's read the book. Let's study this book and find out. We will find out so much different than that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, as we've been talking about quite a bit, obviously, I think we should be obvious by this point, and we've been bringing it up a lot that, Bill is really painting the picture of a lot of, reviewing again the sickness and the state of the alcoholic, but also taking great pains to illustrate the spiritual sickness of our spouses, right? Of our wives and husbands or significant others. And so some of the things that he's saying here worry about what other people are thinking. I mean, what is worrying about what other people are thinking? Fear. How am I being judged? What are other people whispering about me? What are they saying about me? And what did we learn earlier in the book as spiritually sick people, right? Back on 66, 67, 68, in that area, filled full of fear because self-reliance has failed us. So when I'm leaning on me, I get full of fear and I worry, worry, worry what you guys think. What will the neighbors think? Top of 115. We find that most of this embarrassment is unnecessary. While you need not discuss your husband at length, you can quietly let your friends know the nature of his illness. But you must be on guard not to embarrass or harm your husband. It's another big ask there.
Yeah, look at the amount of responsibilities putting on the wife right now. I mean, it's like he's heaping it on, man. It's like, it seems to bother me when I read this. But remember, we're looking at how to practice these principles in all our affairs too, because in working with others, they don't really tell us how to practice these principles. What we're looking at for us here today is in these next three chapters: two wives, the employers, and the family afterwards. Where do I find principles of success when I'm reading this chapter? How can I flip the script? Look at myself here. And the last sentence in that paragraph that David read says, but you must be on guard not to embarrass or harm whoever. That is how I should behave. That is a principle of success. I should never, ever treat anyone differently than I want to be treated, right? The golden rule. That is something I need to be looking at. If I'm a sarcastic person by nature, that needs to change. If I'm a person who likes to call you out in front of people and throw you under the bus, I need to change that too. So it's just a way for me to look at what is the spiritual principle behind that. How can I practice that principle and be successful at? Be aware and be on guard not to embarrass another individual.
So there's embarrassment, which is really fear over, I'm embarrassed because I'm afraid of how you're judging me or how you're talking about me. It's unnecessary. Yeah, in theory, it's unnecessary. But try telling any spiritually sick person like ourselves not to be in fear. It just doesn't happen, right? We're full of fear, guys. And so are the people around us because they're all sick too. You don't have to discuss it. I just like he says, quietly let your friends know the nature of his illness. Not that just our husbands and wives are jerks and they're screwing up, although you can be angry and say that too, but it's like, I got a really sick spouse on my hands. This is what I've learned, that this really is a sickness. He or she is not just trying to hurt us. But you must, and Rob called this out in the chat, must, right? We think we're up to 100 and I don't know, our friend Howard is up to like 134, 135 musts in the book that are sometimes have to and has to and had to and things like that. But here's the M word, must be on guard not to embarrass or harm your husband. And I think the idea here, that's a tall order because of how we've hurt the people around us. We're saying, oh, so again, sort of be the bigger person. That's tough to do when we've been damaged. I mean, I think we can see that as people. I'm not saying it's okay to embarrass or harm, but a frustrated person who loves us, they might get gossipy. They may assassinate our character, and it's probably only a fraction of the harm we've done to them. When you have carefully explained to such people that he is a sick person, you will have created a new atmosphere. Barriers which have sprung up between you and your friends will disappear with the growth of sympathetic understanding. You will no longer be self-conscious or feel that you must apologize as though your husband were a weak character. This is the distinction, right? He may be anything but that. Your new courage, good nature, and lack of self-consciousness will do wonders for you socially.
Yeah, so what we're explaining here, so for the wife, for myself, if I'm the person living with the alcoholic, is when you carefully explain to such people that he's a sick person. So this is taken into effect that I've read and studied this book up to this point, so I know what an alcoholic looks like. That once he starts, he can't stop, and once he stops, he cannot stay stopped. And the greater part of this illness is that my life is unmanageable. So I can explain that to other people. I can certainly do that because people need to be educated about it. A lot of times you just think, for me anyways, I thought the drunk was the guy underneath the bridge with the raincoat and the brown bag, not necessarily, right? That's not how I showed up here, but I was very close. And and then it says at the bottom of that paragraph, your new courage, good nature, and lack of self-consciousness will do you wonders for you socially. So self-consciousness is a heightened awareness of oneself, right? Just totally aware of what's going on around me all the time. And that is also a principle of success, to have this new courage that's been given to me, and good nature and lack of self-consciousness will do wonders for you socially. So that means I'm going to get out. I'm no longer going to be a prisoner in my own home, being imprisoned by the alcoholic and the drug addict. And my wife was. She certainly was for years and years. No freedom at all, and stealing her home all the time by me. So explaining to other people about the mind, the body, and the spirit, the threefold illness that it really is, and then also incorporating and getting the gift of courage and good nature. And this is how I can practice principles of success, is being aware, self-consciousness, heightened awareness of oneself.
Here's something I just noticed too. I had a couple noted here, but every sentence in here except for one is a promise, guys. So if you like marking these promises, follow along here. When you've carefully explained to such people that he is a sick person, so if you do this thing, you will have created a new atmosphere. It's a promise. If you do this, something's going to happen. Barriers which have sprung up between you and your friends will disappear with the growth of sympathetic understanding. That's a promise. You will no longer be self-conscious or feel that you must apologize as though your husband were a weak character. That's a promise. He may be anything but that. That's the only sentence in the paragraph that I don't read as a promise. And then this last sentence, your new courage, good nature, and lack of self-consciousness will do wonders for you socially. That's a promise. So the idea here, I think, and going back to what the point I was trying to make in the previous paragraph is, if the spiritually sick person who loves us really understands how we're sick and owns that and shares it with the people in our lives that care about us and say, hey, we got this sick guy, this sick gal in our hands. Again, take the sort of spiritual higher road and try to get healthier with ourselves or themselves, then they start to get some promises of their own. Like lots of promises that come from this spiritual work, guys. All right. Moving on. The same principle applies in dealing with the children. Unless they actually need protection from their father, it's best not to take sides in any argument he has with them while drinking. Use your energies to promote a better understanding all around. Then that terrible tension which grips the home of every problem drinker will be lessened.
The same principles applies in dealing with the children. So these are principles that Bill's pointing out here. Unless they can actually need protection from their father. So if that's the case, I got to take some kind of action here. It is best not to take sides in any argument. So I'm looking at that as a sponsor. If I'm a sponsor, I'm not taking any sides in an argument with the husband, the wife, the husband, the partner. I'm just not doing that. It's not my role. And that's a spiritual principle. The principle of success, by the way. And then the next sentence is use your energies to promote a better understanding all around. So the energies, these positive energies that I have, is also another principle of success, right? That I can practice here. And then that terrible tension, which grips the home of every problem drinker, will be lessened. And David pointed out, these are some really phenomenal promises that I didn't even know that were existed either, So it's like a new way to we read the book and then we get more blessings here by the black and white, and the pages are showing up in different ways today.
Yeah, I think it's easier to digest the chapter that's got a lot of direction in it when they're followed up with promises. So it's not just the direction, right? So second sentence is direction. Unless they actually need protection for their father, it's best not to take sides in any argument he has with them with drinking. It's a little softer, but it's direction. It's saying, don't do this thing. And then do this thing, use your energies to promote a better understanding all around, as David talked about. And then, so direction, promise, terrible tension, which grips the home of every problem drinker, will be lessened. So if they do this, they will get that. Frequently, you have felt obliged to tell your husband's employer and his friends that he was sick when, as a matter of fact, he was tight, drunk. Avoid answering these inquiries as much as you can. Whenever possible, let your husband explain. Ooh, what a novel idea. David, I'm sure, has got some personal experience in this. Your desire to protect him should not cause you to lie to people when they have a right to know where he is and what he is doing. Wow. Discuss this with him when he is sober and in good spirits. Ask him what you should do if he places you in such a position again. but be careful not to be resentful about the last time he did so. Hmm.
Yeah, this is my story again. When I look at this thing, this paragraph here is enabling, right? This is what my wife did, and because of her enabling, because she would call me into work sick because I was just unable to make a phone call. Even that's how bad off I was to call off work, and I would beg her to make that phone call. She did it. They actually changed the handbook that the employee had to call in for himself because she was calling in for me too frequently, so I wouldn't lose my job. She was scared to death. We had children, house, cars. It's gonna lose it everything. And I couldn't stop because I had no power, no choice, no control. But I did not know that. But this is what I asked of her constantly, selfishly and self-centeredly. I pull this off all the time, and this is what I put her through. And the last sentence in that paragraph on top of 116 says, be careful not to be resentful. You know, the book talks about resentment about 15, 16 times, 15 times, I believe it is, in the book. And I'm not going to go to those pages because it's not relevant to do right now. But if I'm really actually practicing these principles around my affairs, it gives me directions on what to do with the resentment in step 10. You know, watch, ask, discuss, and turn and amend. So these are the things that I can do. The what at, the acronym for watch, ask, discuss, amend, and turn. But be careful not to be resentful. So being careful not to be resentful is also a principle of success. If I practice that principle, I will have success. Not to have this resentment. I need to discuss this with someone immediately. Ask it to be removed. Turn my thoughts to someone else quickly. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think just to add a little bit, obviously there's some more direction in here, and I kind of love this direction because what it's doing is saying, hey, don't compromise your own principles, don't contribute to making yourself even more spiritually ill, covering for your spouse. I think it's great. And it's really starting to institute some personal accountability for the alcoholic, for the addict. As it says, whenever possible, let your husband explain. And say, hey, man, hey, woman, no way, I'm not going to do this. And then discuss this plan when he's sober and in good spirits. That feels a little off kilter because when I was physically sober, when I was dry before I had a spiritual solution, I don't know how much I was in good spirits. You guys can probably relate to that. So if you see that window, it's going to be for about 17 minutes on a random Tuesday. You better grab it, right? Fortunately, I was not married then. My wife and I met in a meeting. I don't know, 18 years ago or so. And thank God, we used to say all the time, thank God we met in a meeting and not before we were recovered. There is another paralyzing fear. You may be afraid well, hold on a second. Let's just pause for a sec.
Yeah.
There is another paralyzing fear. We started at the top of tonight talking about all this fear, right? And let's not undervalue shame and embarrassment and pride and ego and humility, all these things how embarrassed someone can be, how crippling the fear can be when we are being judged by the people around us. And it doesn't matter that other people are judging us, or they might not even be judging us. We just think they are. But I love Bill's language here as another paralyzing fear. He's saying we've screwed up the lives of our spouses and our kids and our families so bad that they are as full of fear as we are, and they are paralyzed. What does it mean to be paralyzed? Can't move, can't action, dead in the water, right? A breathing, thinking, feeling, full of fear, feeling machine in an existence, not living a life. What a terrible burden that we've placed on these people who love us, right? Paralyzing fear. I don't know if you want to say anything about that statement real quick, David. It just hit me between the eyes, or I can keep going.
Yeah, no, you can just keep going. Go ahead, please.
You may be afraid your husband will lose his position. You are thinking of the disgrace and hard times which will befall you and the children. This experience may come to you, or you may already have had it several times. Should it happen again, regard it in a different light. Maybe it will prove a blessing. It may convince your husband he wants to stop drinking forever. And now you know that he can stop if he will. Time after time, this apparent calamity has been a boon for us, for it opened up a path which led to the discovery of God. Hmm.
Yeah. So, top of there is, David pointed out this paralyzing fear. So, uh, it, we cannot underestimate or understate this, that this fear is the driving force, is what blocking me off from power and God too. But also it is a real feeling, and it is driving me, and it's just, and it talks about also, because there's times where I think maybe I'm not, maybe it's fancy, it's not real. On page 66 to talk about that related to resentments, but it's a real feeling. And why is it? Because you may be afraid your husband's going to lose his position. Me, I was a breadwinner. My wife had this fear, and I remember the day that they showed up with a nurse that was going to hold the cup for me to pee in at work, like actually going to hold it for me. I ain't getting away with this time. I lost my job that day. I actually didn't go. I didn't take the whiz quiz. I just said I'm guilty. I'm gonna lose my job. And I had a an excellent position, and I had to go home and tell my wife I lost my job because I couldn't pass a drug test. That is her greatest fear, and it happened to her. This is how selfish, self-centered this disease was. And I remember I was both sitting there crying. She was crying because we're going to be homeless or living with our parents. I'm crying because I feel sorry for myself. I promise you that. It probably wasn't thinking about anyone else but me. And in untreated alcoholism, I promise that's what I was thinking today. But it says it should happen again regarding different light. Maybe it will prove a blessing. So later in that paragraph, it talks about it may convince your husband and he wants to stop drinking forever. Permanent recovery. Permanent recovery. None of this one day at its time stuff. We live one life one day at a time. I have permanent recovery. I haven't taken a drink or a drug in over 25 years. I have some musts, as David pointed out, 100 and some, 140, 130, whatever it is today that we look at that I have to do every day. I practice these principles in all my affairs in my best ability. And God, by the way, gives me the ability to work these steps. And as I practice these steps, life start getting better. Around my life gets better, and life's around me get better. And then back to the paragraphs, because it says stop drinking forever. So that is absolutely guaranteed that can happen. It does happen. And now you know that he can stop if he will. Time after time, his apparent calamity have been a boon to us. A boon is a blessing, right? It's just a blessing. And to us, and it opened up a path which led to the discovery of God. My bottom was a feeling. It was kind of a weenie bottom, but that's what it was. It was a feeling that this is my life, but it's never going to get any better than this. That is the moment that God froze the liar in me to see the truth long enough to say, this is my life. It's not getting any better than this. And I took an action against my nature that I never done before in my life. I called one of you and I asked you for help. And I haven't picked up a drink or a drug with the actions and a relationship with God in my life in all those 25 plus years. I couldn't have done it on my own power. I couldn't have done any of this on my own power. But this all works because this powerful program of action. That's all I got, David.
Yeah, I'll just double down on two quick points. And it was, if this happens, if this experience occurs, it may convince your husband he wants to stop drinking forever. And David already badgered us about that appropriately. This is not I don't drink a day at a time. This is if I'm done drinking, well and for good. If I want to be done more than I want to keep drinking, if I'm fully convinced, right? If I've learned through the help of you guys that I had to concede to my innermost self that as a real alcoholic or real addict, then it means I do want to be done. And if so, what happens is it could open up a path which led to the discovery of God. So first, it just starts with a desire, right? And the hardest part is the beginning. Every time I work with a newcomer, it's like, hey man, I'm going to try to help you, get you to God, get you some relief and some freedom fast. But the first few weeks are going to be rough because you got to white knuckle it. Because if you don't stop drinking or drugging for a few weeks, I can't. You're not going to absorb any of this step work. It's going to go in one ear and out the other. So I don't hold on so tight and white knuckle it, but man, if you just do it, you are going to get to God in a hurry. And I promise I'm going to help you along the way. Got to have that gift of desperation, though.
Mm-hmm.
We've elsewhere remarked how much better life is when lived on a spiritual plane. You think? If God can solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too. Ain't that the truth? We wives found that, like everybody else, we were afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, and all the things which go to make up the self-centered person. Okay, hold on. Let's read this again. We wives found that, like everybody else, what's implied here, that spiritually ill, right? Because spiritually healthy people don't live this way. Like everybody else who's spiritually ill, we were afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, and all the things which go to make up the self-centered person. And we were not above selfishness or dishonesty, not above selfishness or dishonesty. As our husbands began to apply spiritual principles in their lives, we began to see the desirability of doing so too. Demonstration. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So Bill's for me anyways, there's dots to connect in this paragraph, and I certainly love now he's really bringing God into this thing, because let's remember something. When I first got here, for me anyways, I thought it was a self-help program. I just did. And there's a lot of people in the meetings were also doing the same thing, like helping themselves. And I remember sitting in meetings and we're trying to figure out each other's problems, like what lawyer to get for this divorce, and what job to get to help this guy. Like a meeting would have evolved around that. It was like insane, the stuff that we talked about. This is not a self-help program. This is anything but that. So this is a God help program. And in that prior sentence that it talked about, or in that prior paragraph, it says, for it opened up a path which led to the discovery of God. It's all about the seeking, always about the seeking of this power in my life, and understanding the effectiveness that God can bring into my life if I practice these principles in all my affairs. And it says, back to page 116, second paragraph, we have elsewhere remarked how much better life is when we live on a spiritual plane. I have no argument with that. I will promise you my life is so much better when I'm practicing these principles. I have to be awake to that. I must have been asleep dreaming I'm awake most of my sobriety even. But when I started living in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, I actually started experiencing the promise of step 10. And it just absolutely blows me away, because it says on page 86 of, because I'm going to set this paragraph up here, 86 on the prom, or 85, I'm sorry, in the top of the page of promises, he can solve our problems too. If God can solve the age-old root of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too. Problems, plural. Back to 85 in the 10-step promises. I won't read all the 10-step promises. You can do that on your own you want, but 3/4 through the page, or almost the last sentence, the second to last sentence, it says, instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor afraid. That is our experience. This is not a theory. This is our experience. The problem, what is the problem? The problem was the obsession of the mind that drove me back to drink without my permission, without my consent. I picked up a drink, and my life was so unmanageable. Quicksand surrounded all around me. That's the way I lived my whole entire life. Those things on my own power, I could not remove. God does that for me. And if I don't rest, I can't rest on my laurels. The things that I did yesterday, I have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. That means if I don't practice these principles on a daily basis, I don't get to have that daily reprieve. I desperately need a daily reprieve. And so does people around me. And that's my experience that we're talking about there. And then it says, we wives found that, like, back to page 116, second paragraph. We wives found that, like everyone else, we were afflicted with, and these are our character defects, and also brought upon by the alcoholic sometimes, or maybe other things, but pride, self-pity, vanity, and all these things, which go to make up a self-centered person. We can go on to page 60 through 63 and look at what the real problem is, the root to my troubles are. That I'm just looking at this from my own angle instead of looking at it as directions to my wife. And then it says, our husband began to apply spiritual principles in their lives. We began the desirability of doing so too. So this is an attraction, not a promotion. What is an attraction? An attraction to me is about living these principles in my life, like living them, like actually practicing them, and being a part of, like, treating my wife like the child of God that she is, like not be fault finding, not be an argument. Bill gives us directions and working with others and how to do this. Everything is setting itself up for this crescendo of what it looks like to have a spiritual experience. It says, so our husbands began to apply spiritual principles in their lives, and we began to see the desirability of doing so too. So if it's an attraction to me, maybe it'll be an attraction to her. Do I need it? Does my wife need to go to Al-Anon? I have no idea. None of my business. Do I need Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous? Desperately. Do I need God? Desperately. Does she need it? I have no idea. That's none of my business. I'm just saying for me, I certainly do.
Yeah, I'll just, this is a really fun paragraph now that I've, read it a couple of times here and David was talking about it. So we've elsewhere remarked how much better life is when lived on a spiritual plane. I mean, that's pretty much the whole crux of the book, right? Is that like get spiritually right and everything is going to be a bazillion, immeasurably better, right? And I don't know if this is supposed to be intended to be patronizing or reassuring, because I can kind of read it as if God can solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too, right? Like our petty little schemes and plans and problems. But I don't really think it's intended to be that way. I think instead what it's really intended to be like, we can demonstrate to you, we can show you that our God, as each of us understands him, saved our lives, saved our butts, from crippling alcoholism, crippling addiction. And if he can do that, then he can help us with the problems that the people around us have as well. And David did a cross-reference back to 85. I'll also just take a cross-reference back to page 45. And just a reminder, well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem for the alcoholic, right? And now it's saying, hey, God's also going to solve all your problems for our spouses as well. And then, we talked about these character defects. No need to go on more about that. And then what's this last sentence about? It's about demonstration, right? These hopeless cases of people we love start to get healthy. How? By for the first time applying spiritual principles, meaning what? They started to get out of themselves. We started to get out of ourselves. And therefore, our husbands or wives or boyfriends or girlfriends or parents or kids or friends, they were like, oh man, maybe we could do some of this too, and maybe we won't be so sick. Bottom paragraph on 116. At first, some of us did not believe we needed this help. We thought, on the whole, we were pretty good women, capable of being nicer if our husbands stopped drinking. But it was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. Wow. Let's read that sentence again. But it was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. Now we try to put spiritual principles to work in every department of our lives. When we do that, we find it solves our problems too. The ensuing lack of fear, worry, and hurt feelings is a wonderful thing. We urge you to try our program, for nothing will be so helpful to your husband as the radically changed attitude toward him, which God will show you how to have. Go along with your husband if you possibly can.
Yeah, so I'm going to skip right down to the middle of the paragraph there because that's the meat and potatoes. But it's because, and David read the sentence twice, but it was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. I just got to ask myself one question when I'm taking this inventory of myself. How am I doing without God's power in my life? How am I doing with personal relationships? How am I doing with my prey to misery and depression? How about that fear? We've talked about fear for like 10 minutes already tonight. It gets me coming and going on my own power. And then it says, now we try to put spiritual principles to work in every department of my life. My life isn't segmented in different areas anymore. I behaved at meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous when I got sober like an angel. I come out of the big book. I was talking about prayer and meditation. And I didn't literally do this, but I go home and kick the cat. I never kick my cat. I would never, ever harm an animal. I would harm a human being long before I would harm an animal. I would never harm an animal. Just kidding. I'm just saying, I didn't, if someone cut me off in traffic, I didn't have any principles in my life that I was practicing because no one was holding me accountable. I needed to have a big book sponsor that's going to take me through this work and get me to steps 10, 11, and 12 so I can have what? Disciplines, because God is going to discipline me in this way. And when I started practicing these principles, guess what happened? Again, my life wasn't segmented in different ways. I did when you weren't giving me what I thought I needed, my expectations were off the charts. They weren't even on the page any longer. I didn't have expectations of other human beings. I started treating my life like the child of God that she is. My kids like the children of God that they are. Human beings everywhere I went. I treated them the way I wanted to be treated, and these principles started working in my life. And I thought, man, I want more and more of this. And I started studying this book more, and I started working with others, getting out of myself more and more. And the experience was just resonated throughout my whole family. And then it says, when we do that, we find it solves our problems too, because we're getting out of self. I need to get out of self. Self is my problem. It's not a drink or a drug. How can it be? I haven't had a drink and a drug in a long time. And then it says, the ensuing lack of fear, worry, and hurt feelings is a wonderful thing. We urge you to try our program. Our program, the 164 pages of the big book, that's our program. And by the way, it's the doctor's opinion too, the first 10 pages, and the step stop on page 103. But let's study all 174 pages like we're doing here in this book study, because it's full of nuggets. It's full of principles of success that I need to put into my life today. And skip a sentence there. It says, God will show you how to have and go on with your husband if you possibly can. God will show. I love show. I don't want to be told, because I have a very hard time taking direction. But when you show up in my life as a demonstration, like when I first got sober and I had 5 kids, and each one of them was pulling their hair or spilling their milk at the table, or I had to run there, here, there, and everywhere. I had a buddy that had 3 daughters, and I would go over to his house and he would demonstrate through me, even though I don't know if he was intentionally doing this, how to be a father with children. I didn't know how to do that sober. It was overwhelming for me to wake up. And when I mean wake up, get sober, and find out I had all these responsibilities in my life. But God showed me by demonstrations of you people in my life how to pull that off with his power in my life. And again, I brought this up earlier in the talk, that when I first got sober, I wanted to make my amends quickly, like right away, like skip 1 through 8 and just go right to I'm sorry. Well, we know that amends is not sorry. We know that amends means change. And I didn't have the ability to make those amends. Each step is linked together in a specific order intentionally, so that God will give me the ability to work each step in the order that it's written out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the instructions are in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, there's some great stuff in this paragraph as well, and David did a nice job breaking it down. I'll just add a few things. I am sure I've read this sentence a million times, but it's the one I read twice tonight. But it was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. And again, this is supposed to be the voice of the wife, the voice of the spouse, married to the alcoholic. So we are seeing this alcoholic, and they're seeing this alcoholic, this addict in their life, get healthy through spiritual principles and practices. And so it's saying, yeah, it's a silly idea that we were too good to need God, that we didn't need the same thing. And David asked the question, in a situation like this, how are you doing on your own power? Wife of the alcoholic, husband of the alcoholic, at your wit's end, paralyzed with fear. How you doing on your own power? Now we try to put spiritual principles to work in every department of our lives. Sounds like the 12th step, practicing these principles in all our affairs, right? I'd make a note of that. And when we do that, when I practice these principles in all of my affairs, we find it solves our problems too. Again, that's coming from the perspective of the spouse, and that's a promise. Mark it as a promise. When we do that, when we put spiritual principles to work in every department of our lives, we get results. What are the results? Problem solving by God. It goes on to say, skipping ahead to the top of 117, we urge you to try our program. What program? Well, first 174 pages of the book, like David was talking about, doctor's opinion, and then 1 through 64. And what is the program? What's the 12 steps? Right? That's our program recovery. It's the 12 traditions which protect the program, protect the message. And it's the 12 concepts, right, which perpetuate the message It's unity. It's us all being together and getting into service. It's helping, figuring out a way to help however we can. Next paragraph. If you and your husband find a solution for the pressing problem of drink, you are, of course, going to be very happy. But all problems will not be solved at once. Seed has started to sprout in a new soil, but growth has only begun. In spite of your newfound happiness, there will be ups and downs. Many of the old problems will still be with you. This is as it should be.
I like and dislike this paragraph. If you are a husband, I'm sorry, where was that? If you and your husband find a solution for the pressing problem of drink, which is going to be, find out that on page 44, qualify him to find out once he starts, can he manage the amount that he drinks, and once he stops, can he stay? Can he stop? And then it says on page 44, because we like to take statements and turn them into questions. So halfway through in the first paragraph on page 44, it says, if you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when you're drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. So it answers my question. I'm probably alcoholic, being a little liberal there. If that be the case, please pay attention to this. You may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. That's the solution we offer here. And it works every single time for everybody who does this work honestly and thoroughly. So I don't have to search out for a self-help book or anything else like this. That is my solution for this pressing problem of drink. And of course, you're going to be very happy. Not necessarily. In untreated alcoholism, I'm worse when I'm not drinking. I need these spiritual principles in my life. I desperately need a relationship with God. Promise you, I talked about going home and not literally kicking the cat. Please don't tie me into that. I don't want to be known as the guy who kicks his cat. I would never harm my cat. If that door was open in my office right now, my cat would be up here and he'd be on the screen more than I am. He loves being on Zoom. But I would never harm my cat or anything else. But all problems will not be solved at once. Did I wreck this stuff overnight? No, not going to get solved overnight. But what I have found out, that it does get solved. What I have found out through a lot of hard work and honest hard work, going to work every day and doing the job that I get to go do every day, and all the debt that I piled up and all the harms that I did to my family, all got resolved through practicing these principles in all my affairs. That is a miracle in itself. If someone would have done to my family what I did to my family, I would have definitely kicked them. I promise you that. I would put a gun to their head and blown their brains out, because that was unbelievable, the harms that I caused my family. I don't know why, I know why my wife stayed for the kids. She didn't stay for me because I'm a winner. That's not how that worked. But she, for some reason, found some hope, a glimmer. That's all she had left, a glimmer. She held on to that hope, and I ended up getting sober. And then it says the seed has started to sprout in the new soil. So it takes time to grow things, but growth has only begun. In spite of the newfound happiness, there will be ups and downs. So what I need to focus on, because in the 9 step promises, it starts talking about this is in recovery. That our financial problems will go away. I'm paraphrasing here, but they don't go away right away. I've got to do the legwork here. I'm always responsible for that today. But what I found out, it's not my money. It's not my job. It's not my wife. Those are not my kids. Those are all gifts from God. And I need to treat them as such. I need to be a really good steward with my money. I need to be a really good husband and practice these principles on my affair so I can be a better husband to her and to my children, to be attentive to my grandchildren. When they want to talk, I listen. I pay attention. I am present. I am at my sobriety station all the time. And then it said the last sentence, or second to last, many of the old problems still will be with you. Yeah, they were for a long time. I don't have them any longer. I have lived 2 lives in one, as most of you can relate to. The life I lived before I got sober, and even in Alcoholics Anonymous, but not in the 10th and 11th and 12th steps, those disciplines. I don't live this life. I live the life of freedom, not only from addiction, but a bigger part, freedom from the bondage of self. And my
Mm.
poor wife, I can hardly keep my hands off her today. We've been married for 34 years, and she's cooking turkeys today, and I'm cutting turkeys today, and we're just having the best time in the. And I love my wife to death, man, and she loves me back. And my daughters came over to help, and everybody be at my house tomorrow. This is such a miracle. I don't know how this couldn't have happened on my own power. Didn't
Mm.
happen on my own power, and it could be taken away swiftly if I don't continue to do this work. This is a gift. Sobriety is a gift, and I do not take it for granted because every night I will get on my knees and I will thank God for another day.
Yeah, I'll just add, this paragraph paints this picture, and that it's saying, David talked about this. Great that the drinking, the drugging, whatever the substance or the process addiction problem has stopped. But there's still a whole bunch of other stuff. There's still life, the life we've led to this point, the life we're leading in the moment, and the life in the future. That's going to take time to unwind and improve. And really, what this was making me think about was page 82. And I can just read it again real quick to you guys if you want to. I think it's a good callback to page 82, paragraph 3, which is the alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of other. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. This is all the stuff, guys, that doesn't get resolved just because I put the plug in the jug, right? Just because I'm in the white knuckling and starting to get spiritually better phase. Here's the key, guys. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety, physical sobriety, is what Bill means here. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that physical sobriety is enough. He's like the farmer who came up out of a cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Okay, so the cyclone passed through. My house is literally gone, destroyed. It's now in the land of Oz. And I'm like, well, cyclone's gone. Yeah, but where are we going to live? What about all our stuff? What about my poor cat that David didn't kick that was in the house that got blown away? Right? This is the reality check. So that's to the alcoholic on page 82. And this is to the spouse on 117 saying, hey, yes, great that we have stopped drinking, drugging, cutting, overeating, whatever it is we're doing that was killing us. But we got a long period of reconstruction ahead. And that's okay. It says, this is as it should be. Well, what does that mean? Well, to me, it means two things. It means, hey, guys, this is life. Things don't happen as quickly as we would like. And we love super quick turnarounds. We love instant gratifications, the hallmark of any addict. And the other thing it means is things happen on God's time. That's really, this is as it should be. It's up to God, right? His timeline is what's paramount here, not mine.
I want to add one more thing because a
Please.
lot of times I hear in meetings, acceptance is the answer to all my problems today, right? Page 417 of our book. You know what, though? That's a passage and part of a personal story in the book. That is really not the answer. You know what really is the answer? It's on page 42 in the third paragraph. Go to page 42, if you would, please. Third paragraph. You want to solve problems? This is the answer to that. Not acceptance. Acceptance is a wonderful thing. But the very last paragraph on page 42 in the chapter more about alcoholism, quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. Love that. Dude, I was in a meeting. One of my sponsors whipped that out one day in front of the whole group. I was like, yeah, baby, love that. Where's that at in the book? I freaking couldn't remember where it was at. I was like, dude, that's phenomenal. Like, I forgot about that because I don't want to get caught in the rut of just because there's a story in the back of the book. And it's not a wonderful story. I hate that story, but you can love it all you want. I'm saying it's like Living Sober. I hate that freaking book too, but you can love it if you want. I just don't like it, but I'm just saying it's just like, when I find out the spiritual principles can solve all my problems, why wouldn't I want to do that? Because my troubles are of my own making. So if I stop making troubles for myself, I won't have these problems. Doesn't that make sense today? It didn't for a long time. Makes sense today.
All right, we'll get one or two more paragraphs in, and then we'll be ready to wrap up. So, second full paragraph on 117. The faith and sincerity of both you and your husband will be put to the test. Woo, the faith and sincerity of both you and your husband will be put to the test. These workouts should be regarded as part of your education, for thus you will be learning to live. You will make mistakes, but if you're earnest, they will not drag you down. Instead, you will capitalize them. A better way of life will emerge when they are overcome.
Yeah, hold on, I got something I was looking up when he said that. So I'll come back to it. So faith and sincerity. So faith is like going to the gym and working out. It's just like I try to get stronger when I go lift weights, right? Or I exercise in some way. And I gotta exercise my faith. And it's the sincerity that I know that it works for you. I believe that it works for you, then I have hope. And belief and hope go hand in hand. And I believe that they work for me, they'll work for you, then they gotta work for me too. But faith and sincerity for both you and your husband will be put to the test. Absolutely, it will be. My job is not to step in her yard. It's just not. My wife does not ever need me to tell her what to do. She gets to have all the freedoms that she always deserved to have, and she gets them today because I'm sober. I'm a member of a 12-step program who demonstrates through me that this stuff works for everybody who does this honestly and thoroughly. Why wouldn't I want that? And I do want that, and I want more of it. These workouts should be regarded as part of your education, for thus you will be learning to live. So learning to live, and I'm going to come back to that after David talks because I got to look it up real quick. I can't remember where it
Sure.
was at, but it says learning to live, living a life with sobriety. That is a way different life than I've ever lived before. Says you will make mistakes. I don't really make any. Yeah, okay, I do. Yeah, I make a lot of mistakes. But guess what I get to do? I get to admit to them right away without a but. And I don't even use the word sorry. You've heard me say that here. I was wrong for being short with you, Karen. Please forgive me for how I said that. And what can I do to correct this?
Mm.
I don't use the word sorry. I wore sorry out years and years ago. I was wrong. It for me has more meaning for me. You make mistakes, but if you are in earnest, which means honest, they will not drag you down. Instead, you will capitalize them. A better way of life will emerge when they are overcome. That's a promise.
Yeah.
And I know David was going to go there. I didn't mean to steal your
All right.
thunder on
Got
that.
it.
But dude, isn't that great? I love this program. I love that we're picking up little nuggets here that I didn't see before. Go ahead, David.
Mm. Yeah, this first sentence, the faith and sincerity of both you and your husband we put to the test. So what that implies is we need a lot of faith and we need a lot of sincerity. To what? To persevere. To what? What does that mean? If I don't have adequate faith and sincerity, it's going to be tough for both the alcoholic and the spouse, right? The spiritually sick spouse to be thorough and honest in their pursuit of the program. And I talk about this a lot. Those of you who've been studying with us for a while, we talk a lot about thoroughness and honesty. And where it comes from is page 65, where there's the little chart with the first three columns of the fourth step. And under the chart, it says we went back to our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. And so that's a statement about how do you write up, right? The fourth step. But I've said many times, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty is really a micro of how I approach recovery. Because think about that, of everything that I am encouraged and suggested and directed to do, if I do it thoroughly, which means I do everything, and honestly, it means I tell the truth and I admit nothing, how am I going to get fail in any work in recovery? Thorough and honest. It's like, that's it. It's the only things I have to make sure of. And so I need to approach getting better with faith and sincerity. Otherwise, if I'm not sincere, I'm probably not going to be honest. Right. And if I don't have faith, I'm probably not going to be thorough because I'm just going to wave the white flag and say I'm done. And so then it goes on to say, I love this. You'll make mistakes. But if you're earnest, and this has come up before, and like the amends process Dave was referring to, it's not going to necessarily drag you down. If I honestly feel bad about him, if I correct the behavior and do my damnedest not to do it again, and then instead you will capitalize them, right? So what does that mean to capitalize these mistakes? It means I internalize it. It becomes part of me. It's part of my, I add it maybe to that section in my brain, that working part of the mind where God lives now, where I internalize and capitalize, I keep. It gets added to my structure so that I don't do it again. It makes me more powerful. And then, as David said, yeah, the promise to conclude another really cool paragraph. A better way of life will emerge when they are overcome. Yeah, when I become a more spiritually fit person, I'm going to have a better life. That's again the whole point of everything we're doing here in recovery and everything we're reading and studying about in this book. Did you find the reference you were looking for?
Yeah, well, I got kind of confused because there's way too many of
Okay.
them. But one of them, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't know this off the top of my head, but it's okay. I'm a human being who needs to study
Full of
more.
fear,
That's all.
right?
So, how about the third step prayer on page 63? It says, God, second paragraph, 63. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. God's way of life, not my way of life. My way of life is full of self. May I do thy will always. That is a prayer with no amen. Let's continue to do this work. And I think what I really was looking for is our way of living, which I think is in the preface in the front of the book, that Bill is giving us a strong promise that people have permanent sobriety, and meaning that our way of living is a better way to live, meaning practicing these principles in our affairs. I'll try to find that next week. There's too much information, and I was just too discombobulated.
Well, I grabbed it for you out of the
Oh,
forward of the
thank you.
first edition.
Yep.
Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all.
That's it. Thank you.
That's a perfect place to stop. We're right just about at the top of the hour.